It was supposed to be a dream vacation, a luxurious cruise across the Caribbean, warm breezes, endless ocean views, and days filled with nothing but relaxation. But the moment I stepped aboard the Pacific Queen, something felt off. At first, I brushed it off as nerves. After all, I had never been on a cruise before. But there was something in the air, a kind of tension that didn't belong on a ship meant for leisure. The crew, despite their polished uniforms and forced smiles, seemed uneasy. The passengers, people who should have been excited about the adventure ahead, looked distracted. Their eyes darted around the ship, some glancing nervously at the sea, while others muttered among themselves, though no one spoke loudly enough for me to make out the words. It wasn't long before I began to hear rumors. Whispers passed from one person to the next. Some said the ship was cursed. Others claimed it had been haunted for decades. The Pacific Queen wasn't just any cruise ship. It had a dark history. There were stories of disappearances, strange occurrences, and unexplained events that had taken place on previous voyages. Most of these tales were dismissed as nothing more than superstition. But there was one thing I couldn't ignore. The ship had a reputation, and in the pit of my stomach, I could feel it. The ship was holding onto something it wasn't willing to let go. The first night aboard was uneventful, or at least that's how I wanted to believe. I made my way to the bar, hoping to settle in with a drink and forget about the uneasy feeling creeping up my spine. The bartender, a middle-aged man with a permanent frown etched into his face, handed me a drink with a small, almost imperceptible nod. "You're not the first to have that look in your eyes," he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper, "and you won't be the last." I raised an eyebrow, unsure if he was referring to the strange energy I felt or something else entirely. He didn't elaborate, but the feeling lingered. I spent the next few hours trying to get comfortable, attending a dinner with some of the other passengers. We exchanged pleasantries, talked about the ports we'd visit, but the conversation always seemed to fall flat. Something was missing, something important. It wasn't until the captain came on the intercom, welcoming us to the Pacific Queen and wishing us a pleasant journey, that I noticed it. There was a strange pause in his speech, just before he signed off. A crackle in the air, like the microphone had picked up a whisper that didn't belong to him. It was only for a second, but it was enough to send a chill down my spine. That night, I went to bed with the faintest feeling that something was terribly wrong, but the exhaustion of the day's travel kept me asleep, and I forgot about my unease, at least, until the ship's horn sounded in the early hours of the morning. It was a deep, mournful sound, as if it was calling out into the dark expanse of the ocean, a signal, maybe, that we had left civilization behind, crossing into a territory where no one was meant to go. I didn't think much of it at the time, just another cruise ship ritual, I assumed, but the longer I stayed on board, the more I realized how wrong I was. The Pacific Queen wasn't taking us on a vacation, it was taking us somewhere else, somewhere we weren't supposed to be, and the worst part? We hadn't even noticed yet. This story seems to be getting scarier, doesn't it? If you want more stories like this, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. This helps create even more scary for you. The second day aboard the Pacific Queen started like any other. The sun was shining, the sea was calm, and the passengers seemed to shake off the unsettling tension from the night before. I decided to explore the ship further, hoping to shake the uneasy feeling that had settled over me. But everywhere I went, I couldn't escape the sense that something was watching. I found myself wandering through the grand dining hall, admiring the opulence. The golden chandeliers gleamed brightly, and the long rows of tables seemed like the perfect setting for a celebratory meal. But there was an emptiness here too, like the place had been prepared for an event that never came. The staff moved in a robotic, rehearsed manner, barely exchanging words with each other. Their eyes never met mine. That's when I noticed her, an elderly woman sitting at one of the tables, alone. She wasn't part of the usual crowd of guests. Her face was pale, almost translucent, with deep-set eyes that seemed to pierce through me. Her hands were folded neatly on the table in front front of her, and she didn't move, didn't blink, and didn't make a sound. I assumed she was just a lonely passenger, but something about her struck me as strange. Her silence felt too complete, as if she was trying to remain unnoticed. I walked past her, glancing over my shoulder just once. She was still staring straight ahead, her gaze unwavering. The air around her felt heavy, almost suffocating, and I quickened my pace, eager to escape that odd, cold presence. Later that day, I met a few other passengers, normal people who were excited about the cruise. One woman, in particular, caught my attention. She introduced herself as Mary and seemed to share the same discomfort about the ship that I had been feeling. "It's like everyone's on edge," she said, her voice low, as if she were afraid to speak too loudly. "I don't know. It feels like something's hiding here, something we're not supposed to know about." At first, I dismissed it as paranoia, but as the hours passed, I couldn't shake the feeling that she was right. There was something off about the Pacific Queen, and it wasn't just the strange crew or the eerie passengers. It was the ship itself. The layout of the corridors didn't make sense. Some hallways seemed to loop back on themselves, and others appeared to end in dead ends that shouldn't have existed. The lights flickered more often than they should have, and there were strange, distant noises coming from below deck, as if something or someone was moving around in the darkness. But when I brought it up to Mary, she just shook her head, as if she knew something I didn't. "They won't tell you," she said, her voice trembling. "They never tell anyone." I tried to press her for more information, but she fell silent, looking over her shoulder nervously, as though she were afraid someone might overhear us. That's when I noticed it. The same elderly woman I had seen earlier was standing at the end of the hallway, staring at us. I froze, the air growing colder, and Mary's face paled. Without saying a word, she grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the elevator. We both stepped inside quickly, avoiding the woman's gaze. The doors slid shut, and we descended into the lower decks of the ship. "What's going on?" I asked, still confused. Mary's face was pale as she took a shaky breath. "You saw her, didn't you?" I nodded, unsure of what she meant. "That woman, she's been here for years. She never leaves. No one knows who she is or where she came from, but she's been on every cruise the ship has taken, and every time, people go missing." I laughed nervously, not sure if she was joking. "People go missing? On a cruise ship? Are you serious?" Her eyes locked onto mine, deadly serious. "It's real. I don't know why, but something about the ship, about her, makes people disappear. You don't believe me now, but you will." I didn't know what to think. Was she just another paranoid passenger caught up in the hysteria? Or was there something truly sinister about the Pacific Queen that was just waiting to reveal itself? As we emerged onto the lower deck, I could feel the temperature drop, the air thick with a cold, metallic scent that seemed to emanate from the very walls of the ship. The lights flickered again, and I could hear the low hum of machinery below us, like the heartbeat of the ship itself. That's when it happened. We heard a scream, a woman's scream, sharp and frantic, coming from somewhere down the hallway. It was quickly cut off, replaced by an unnatural silence that sent a chill straight to my bones. Mary grabbed my arm. "We have to go," she whispered, her voice shaking. "We have to get out of here." But it was too late. We rushed down the hallway, the echo of our footsteps mingling with the strange hum of the ship. Mary was ahead of me, her face tense with fear, and I could tell she was trying to get away from something she couldn't explain, something I was only beginning to understand. The scream had shaken me to my core, but the silence that followed was even worse, the kind of silence that fills the air like a thick fog, suffocating every breath. We reached the main stairwell, and I looked around nervously. No one else seemed to be around, but I had the unsettling feeling that we were not alone. As we descended to the lower levels of the ship, the temperature continued to drop. The walls seemed to close in, and the lights flickered more frequently, plunging us into moments of darkness before coming back on with a harsh snap. I could feel the pressure building in my chest as if the ship itself was pressing down on me. "Where are we going?" I asked, my voice shaking. Mary didn't answer. She just kept moving faster, her shoes clicking on the metal floors with urgency. It was clear she wasn't planning on stopping until we were deep in the heart of the ship. As we rounded a corner, she pulled me toward a door at the end of a narrow hallway. It was a maintenance door, one of those that were usually locked to keep passengers out of restricted areas. Mary didn't hesitate. She fumbled with her keycard, swiping it repeatedly until the door clicked open. She pushed it open with a creak, revealing a dark, narrow passage that led deeper into the bowels of the ship. I hesitated. Everything in me screamed that this was wrong, but something urged me forward. Maybe it was the scream, maybe it was the desperate look on Mary's face, or maybe it was the growing sense that whatever was happening aboard the ship wasn't just a strange occurrence, it was something far more sinister. "We have to go down here," Mary said, her voice barely above a whisper. "There's something you need to see." As we descended deeper into the bowels of the Pacific Queen, the air grew colder and the ship's creaks and groans became more pronounced. We passed through more maintenance corridors, which led to storage rooms filled with unused equipment and supplies, but none of it looked right. The items, tools, ropes, and crates were stacked in strange arrangements, like they'd been disturbed, but no one had bothered to clean up. The smell of rust and something foul lingered in the air, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking through a place that had been abandoned long ago. Finally, we reached a small, unmarked door at the very bottom of the ship. Mary glanced nervously over her shoulder before pushing it open. What we found inside wasn't what I expected. The room was cold, unnaturally cold, and dimly lit by a single flickering bulb hanging from the ceiling. It was a storage room, yes, but what filled it wasn't anything ordinary. Strange symbols were painted on the walls, dark, jagged lines that seemed to crawl toward each other, forming a grotesque shape in the center of the room. The floor was littered with old, torn scraps of paper, some of which had writing on them in a language I didn't recognize. Mary stepped forward, her face tense with dread. She kneeled beside a pile of old, yellowed papers and picked one up. It was a tattered journal, its pages worn with age. She opened it carefully and began to read aloud in a low, haunted voice. "The ship, it's not just a ship, it's a vessel, a trap, a place where souls are taken and kept for eternity. They never leave, not truly. There's something on board, something ancient, something that feeds on the fear of the passengers. They come to it, and it devours them slowly, one by one, and then they disappear, as if they never existed." Her voice trembled as she read, and I felt my heart start to race. "What is this?" I asked, trying to steady my breath. "This is the ship's true history," she whispered. "And the truth is, no one is ever meant to leave the Pacific Queen." I felt a chill run down my spine as the full weight of her words sank in. The ship was a prison, a trap, and we were all trapped inside it. "What do you mean, no one ever leaves?" I asked, my voice cracking. Mary stood up slowly, her eyes filled with fear. "People disappear all the time on this ship. Some are lost in the night, never to be seen again. Others, they're taken by something that lives in the ship's very walls. It feeds on fear, on the fear of those who are trapped here, and when it's finished with them." She paused, her eyes darkening. "They're never found." Before I could ask anything else, a loud crash echoed from the hallway. My blood ran cold as I turned to face the door. Someone, or something, was out there. Slowly, the air seemed to grow even colder, the temperature dropping with each passing second. "Come on," Mary whispered, grabbing my arm. "We have to leave, now." But as we moved toward the door, I heard something else. A soft, eerie sound, a faint, almost melodic hum that seemed to be coming from the walls themselves. It was so subtle at first that I thought I was imagining it, but then it grew louder, a low, rhythmic hum that made my skin crawl, and that's when I realized the ship itself was alive. Mary's grip on my arm tightened as the eerie hum grew louder, almost suffocating. The walls of the Pacific Queen seemed to pulse, as though the ship itself was breathing, alive, and waiting for something. I could feel the temperature drop even further, my breath visible in the icy air as we moved toward the door. The crash we'd heard earlier echoed in the corridor again, much closer this time. I could hear footsteps, heavy, deliberate, coming toward us, but they weren't the footsteps of a person. There was a dragging sound, as if something large and heavy was being pulled across the floor. I froze, my heart hammering in my chest. "What the hell is that?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. Mary's face drained of color as she pulled me closer to the door. "It's them. It's what they leave behind." Before I could ask what she meant, the door behind us suddenly slammed shut with a deafening bang. We spun around, only to find the room pitch black, darker than before, as if the ship had swallowed every shred of light. The hum had stopped. Instead, there was only the sound of something breathing, something very close. I could feel it in the air, a presence, and it wasn't just one thing. It was as if the ship itself had come alive, and it wasn't happy we had discovered its secret. The door handle rattled violently. We spun toward it, but it was useless. No matter how hard we tried, the door wouldn't budge. The breathing grew louder, more insistent, and then I heard it, a voice. It was faint, almost drowned by the hum of the ship, but I could make out a single word: leave. I stumbled backward, my heart racing. Who was that? I gasped, looking around the room, searching for the source of the voice, but there was no one, just the shadows, the oppressive darkness, and the heavy silence that followed. Mary's face was pale, her eyes wide with terror. She stepped back, her breath coming in shallow gasps. "It's too late," she whispered. "We've already woken it up." I didn't understand what she meant by that, but before I could ask, the lights flickered on, only to reveal something I couldn't comprehend. The walls were covered in something dark, something wet. It wasn't rust, it wasn't water, it was something worse. It looked like black veins, pulsating under the surface of the ship's metal, crawling their way through the room like a disease. And in the center of it all, there was a figure, a shadow that seemed to emerge from the very walls themselves. I couldn't see it clearly, but I felt it. I felt its presence, its hunger. It wasn't human, it wasn't even close. The air thickened, suffocating me as the figure stepped forward. I could hear its breathing, slow and deliberate, each exhale sending a chill through my spine. The figure raised its hand, and the shadows followed, stretching out toward me like tendrils. Mary was crying now, backing away. "It's the ship," she whispered. "It's feeding again." The figure took another step. My legs refused to move. I couldn't look away from the terrible, shifting shape that seemed to be made of darkness itself. It reached out a hand, its fingers long and skeletal, and I could feel the pull, an unnatural force drawing me toward it. I tried to scream, but the sound never came. The air in my lungs was frozen solid. The ship itself seemed to groan, the hum returning, louder this time. A low, menacing growl echoed from deep within the ship. And then I saw it, the thing that had been feeding on the fear of everyone aboard. It wasn't just one entity, there were many. The walls were alive, moving, twisting, pulling the shadows closer, closer until I couldn't tell what was part of the ship and what was part of the darkness. They were everywhere. The passengers, those who had vanished, were here too, their eyes wide and vacant, their faces twisted in fear. They were trapped, their souls absorbed by the ship, their bodies nothing more than husks. I felt a sharp pain in my chest, and suddenly I was no longer standing in the room. I was somewhere else, somewhere dark, cold, and endless, a vast, empty void that stretched out in all directions. I could feel the weight of time pressing on me, like I was sinking into something ancient and malevolent. The figure had me now, its cold fingers wrapped around my soul. "You're not leaving," it whispered, and then I was back in the room, gasping for air, trembling uncontrollably. I could see Mary, still backing away, her face twisted in horror, but it was too late for her too. The shadows were closing in on her, wrapping around her like a shroud. "No!" I screamed, but my voice was drowned out by the sound of the ship that was alive, and feeding, and pulling us in. I watched in helpless terror as Mary's body was consumed by the darkness, her scream cut short as the shadows swallowed her whole. And then, the figure turned to me. "You were always meant to stay," it hissed. The shadows closed in on me. The darkness around me thickened, closing in with a suffocating weight. The shadows weren't just creeping, they were alive, crawling up the walls, covering every inch of the room, wrapping themselves around me like cold, clammy fingers. The air itself seemed to turn to ice, making it impossible to breathe. I could feel the ship, the Pacific Queen, beneath my feet, groaning and shifting as if it were a living creature, its very essence trying to pull me deeper into its grip. The figure before me, the thing that had been stalking the ship for so long, stood motionless, watching me with hollow eyes, eyes that weren't human. Its fingers reached out, elongated and skeletal, and I could feel the coldness of its touch even though it hadn't made contact yet. "You should have stayed away," it whispered, its voice echoing in my mind. The words weren't spoken aloud, but I could hear them inside my head, like the ship itself was trying to invade my thoughts. The shadows moved, wrapping tighter around me. I tried to scream, to fight back, but my body wouldn't respond. It was as if I were paralyzed, caught in the thrall of the ship and whatever had taken hold of it. It wasn't just the ship that was alive, it was something far older. The Pacific Queen was a vessel of horrors, a trap that had claimed countless souls, and now it was after mine. But it didn't want my body, it wanted something deeper, something eternal. As the shadows closed in around me, I remembered the journal Mary had read aloud earlier, the truth that had been buried in the pages. The ship is a vessel, a place where souls are taken and kept for eternity. I realized then what it was. The ship wasn't just haunted, it was a prison, an ancient, cursed vessel, built not to carry passengers from port to port, but to trap them, to feed on their fear, to slowly consume their souls over time. The souls of those lost aboard the ship weren't truly gone, they were trapped here, in the walls, in the very structure of the ship itself. I wasn't just a passenger, I was prey. I had always been prey. And now, I was becoming one with the ship. The figure leaned closer, its face a twisted amalgamation of shadows and long-forgotten faces. I saw the faces of the people who had vanished before me, passengers and crew, all lost to the ship's insatiable hunger. Their eyes, wide with terror, stared back at me from the void, their mouths open in silent screams. "You were always meant to stay," the figure hissed again, its voice growing louder, more insistent. "You will never leave." My body felt heavy, as if the ship's weight was pressing down on me. The shadows squeezed tighter, and I could hear the rhythmic hum of the ship growing louder. It wasn't just a sound, it was a pulse, the heartbeat of the ship itself. Just as I thought I would be swallowed by the darkness, I saw something in the corner of the room, a flicker of light. It was faint, but it cut through the shadows like a knife. It was the emergency exit, the one Mary had told me about. It was a small, narrow door, almost hidden behind a stack of old crates. I didn't know how I saw it. Maybe it was my last chance, my only hope, but I knew I had to run. With every ounce of strength I had left, I pushed against the darkness and stumbled toward the door. My legs felt like lead, my body screaming in pain, but I couldn't stop. The ship was trying to drag me back, to pull me into its depths, but I was determined. I reached the door, my fingers trembling as I fumbled with the handle. The shadows were already reaching for me, their cold fingers brushing my back. I swung the door open just as the figure lunged at me, its skeletal hand grabbing for my wrist, but I tore myself free, stumbling through the door and into the cold, empty hallway. For a moment, there was nothing, no sound, no movement, just a deep, oppressive silence that hung in the air like a weight. I didn't look back. I couldn't. The urge to run was overwhelming. I didn't care where I was going as long as it was away from that room, away from the Pacific Queen. I ran through the dark, winding halls, feeling the ship groan beneath me, as if it were alive, as if it were mourning the loss of yet another soul. The emergency exits were close. I could feel them, but every corner seemed to lead me deeper into the labyrinth of the ship. The walls seemed to shift, to twist and turn in impossible ways. But then, I saw it, the light, a faint, flickering glow at the end of a long hallway. I pushed myself forward, not caring about the growing sense of dread creeping up my spine. My only thought was escape. I had to get off the ship. I had to survive. I burst into the main deck, gasping for air, my heart racing in my chest. I ran straight for the lifeboats, my feet pounding against the cold, metal floors. The ship was still groaning beneath me, but the hum had stopped. There was no more presence, no more shadows. It was as if the ship had taken everything it could, and now it was just waiting. I reached the lifeboats and scrambled into one. I didn't even think about the others on board, the other passengers who were still trapped. I could only think about getting as far away as possible. As the lifeboat was lowered into the water, I looked up at the Pacific Queen. The ship loomed above me, dark and silent against the starless sky. I could swear I saw a figure standing on the deck, watching me, but when I blinked, it was gone. The waters were calm, the moon reflecting off the surface, but my heart was still racing, my mind still trapped in the nightmare I had just survived. As the lifeboat drifted away, I realized that the Pacific Queen would continue its voyage. It would take on new passengers, and one by one, they would disappear, lost to the ship's dark hunger. But I had escaped, or so I thought. The Pacific Queen wasn't just a ship, it was a prison, and once you boarded, you were never truly free. If you enjoyed this terrifying story, don't forget to hit the like button, leave a comment, and subscribe for more spine-chilling content. Your support helps the video reach more viewers and brings even more horror to your screen.